Good afternoon, everybody. Maybe good morning if you are west of the Eastern time zone. Just wanted to pop in here and give everybody a quick welcome. It is just the top of the hour. We have a lot of people registered for this webinar, so we're going to give just a few minutes to get everybody logged in here. So just sit tight, and we'll be back with you in just a few minutes for this afternoon's presentation with Julie Pace. And that's it. Be back in a few. All right. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Brian Cansey, and I am the Business Development Manager here with Foundation Software. Today, I'm very, very happy to be here with Julie Pace, PSGM Law. Got a great topic on I-9s, Department of Labor, employment law updates to manage risk. I'm sure this will be chock full of lots of information, so be sure and take notes. Just some quick housekeeping. The presentation, PowerPoint slides, and the recording will be shared in an email that you registered with within 24 hours of wrapping up the event today. Not able to hear anything, we'll log off and try again. Yes. As far as I know, the audio is working. Julie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So again, just some housekeeping. We will be sharing the slide deck and the entire presentation recording within about 24 hours after we wrap up the event today. So check the email that you used to register with. What else do we have? We have questions. There is a little panel at the top of your screen. Got a little question mark in the box. That is where you can go to ask your questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Probably not going to be addressing the questions as we go through, but please do feel free to type those questions in, and we will get to as many as we can. I expect this to be a full presentation, probably going right up to close to the end of our time, but we will hang out as long as we can to answer additional questions. There will be a poll that is launched at the end of the presentation. If you could please, I'll just take a minute and answer that one question. We'd appreciate it. And we will go from there. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over here to Julie. Again, everybody, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in just a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Brian. And thanks to Foundation Software for putting this together so that we all try to be proactive, as you'll see from our PowerPoints. I'd rather you learn information now and hopefully avoid issues than have to call us when it's already a problem and the government's come knocking and we've already got an issue. So the goal is to give you a lot of good information. We are going to share our PowerPoints. Heidi Gilman and I put these together, and we did a lot of detail. So it's kind of a train the trainer. So we'll hit some high level of some key issues to help manage risk at your companies, things that we're seeing out there. And then also you'll have details to go back and look at it, or to go share it with your teammates or your bosses who say that can't be true, or what do you mean we have to change our procedure? So we think this will be helpful to you in that regard. So we're going to cover a lot of things today. So there's like over 200 PowerPoints, but they're all organized very detailed manner. And so we're going to cover, I thought we'd start with the one big beautiful bill and how is that affecting overtime and tax deductions, because that's coming up for this fall and is going to, cause some confusion for employees and for the companies and the HR and the payroll teams trying to figure all that out. We're going to talk about changes in Department of Labor enforcement. That's been going back and forth a bit with every administration. There's been some new updates there. We're going to talk about how you conduct a wage and hour internal audit. And as I go through all this, don't worry that I spin through a bunch of slides quickly. I'll give you the breakdown of where they're at. And if it's something relevant to you, I'll say things like, oh, if you're going to do an audit on classifying employees as exempt or non-exempt, I'm not going to go through, I'm going to give a couple highlights. And then I'll tell you those PowerPoints are, 49 through 63. And then you can just write that down and go back and these are done in a way you can self-teach yourself. And then we're always there if people need more assistance on the outside. We're going to touch base on OSHA just for a moment, because I do a lot of OSHA work nationwide. And there's some things there that you need to be aware of. A couple highlights on handbooks and policies. We're seeing a lot of problems with people going out and picking up on artificial intelligence, AI stuff. It's causing all kinds of problems for companies. Plaintiff side and unions have seeded those areas in the AI, the voracious animal of the AI, and companies are picking them up thinking, oh, that'll save me time. And we've already got lawsuits going because they picked up and don't understand some of the provisions just hurt them and went in a different way against employment, against employers, and didn't help manage the risk. So be careful about that. And then we're going to wrap up with our lovely I-9s and E-Verify. There's a lot to that. We put a lot in here. So if you have questions, as Brian already said, just look at that little box at the top, look at the question mark, write them out. Heidi Gilman, my partner, is here with me, and she's going to try to answer what she can as fast as she can during the program. So some of the things may be helpful that way. Okay, so let's get started. So these are going to be general advice and try to get through scenarios to help you. But, if you have everything changes in employment law with the fact. So there may be facts where you need some attorney-client privileged communications over. So that's fine too. But just remember, this will be general and there may be some exception because one fact can change everything. Okay, let's go through the one big beautiful bill, the overtime tax deduction. What's going on? What are we going to see? Well, employees are already coming in with questions. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act provides for an above the line tax deductions for taxes on overtime pay. Employees do not understand that. Individuals with modified adjusted gross incomes of $150,000 a year or $300,000 for married are eligible for the credit. It's phased out for high wage earners. It's capped at $12,500 per year or $25,000 married filing jointly. So what are we seeing? Well, let me mention a couple of other things. It's only the halftime premium is subject to the deduction. Overtime pay that exceeds the requirements is not eligible for the deduction. So keep that in mind. So like, for example, overtime mandated by state law that's greater than FLSA, such as California's daily overtime, right? California has a special rule on that. It's not eligible. Voluntary employer pay, such as double time for holiday work, not eligible. Things like that. Overtime required by collective bargaining agreement, not eligible. Now, this applies to wages earned from January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2028. And here's what happens. You have to separately report the OT premium on the Form W-2. And the IRS has released a proposed 2026 Form W-2 with specific boxes for reporting the overtime. The law does not change the withholding requirements for FICA, FUTA, things like that, but your payroll systems have to track and report the halftime premiums. This is going to be new, different, and employees are already asking questions. And so we put some examples in here of how to calculate your qualified overtime. So they're just here so you can come to them. 2026 Form W-2 reporting changes, you're going to see new box 12 codes. So it's not going to look like the same W-2 in the past. So you're going to have a TT for total qualified overtime comp, TP for total cash tips reported to employer, TA for employer contributions for Trump account, the new IRA savings account. So there's going to be some things there. Just know it's going to look different. That's the first thing. Just remember that. You'll get help through the process. And then the Form W-4 changes. This has been really confusing, and this is where we're already seeing employees come in. So on W-4, there's a new one, and it allows employees to enter their estimated qualified overtime exemption to increase deductions and reduce withholding. So they're doing that right now on the W-4. And it's been redesigned to add in the tip deduction and overtime deduction, and it's an employee's choice whether to change their withholding. And it was only updated in March of 2026, so not just a little bit ago, a month or two ago. So the problem with that, what are we seeing? Employees are coming in and they're also doing they're doing this above the line deduction to change that they're going to claim their 12,500. And then they're also doing that vehicle, I think it's like a 10,000 passenger vehicle. It's some kind of 10,000 deduction of interest. And so they're coming in and now saying, hey, stop taking taxes out of my paycheck right now. And so that becomes a problem because they don't understand what above the line mean, and it's not dollar for dollar like a tax credit. So it's becoming a little bit confusing for them. And one of the problems that we always find is that the employers get blamed if something happens later and the taxes weren't right. So even though they're allowed to do that, we need to make sure we understand as employers to be careful about just having everybody stop paying taxes, because you know how it goes. It always comes back to the employer to deal with. So the penalties for non-compliance with record keeping. So if you don't file as an employer the correct W-2s, correct, and giving the correct pay statements, or disregarding things. So someone walks in as an employee to payroll and says, hey, I have 12,500 and 10,000 for my car. So take off 22,500. Don't take out those taxes anymore. And you're knowing, or your people know, that like, well, that isn't right. That's not how it works. But, can you be liable for it under this rule? Possibly, if you let them go ahead and do it. So I try to discourage it and have them work with their accountant, even though the rule is there. We have to be a little careful, I think, on getting our people in HR and payroll and management trying to help the employee with their tax calculations. They should get that from their accountant or from the services that are available to them. So those are some of the things that are an issue. State tax considerations. Also remember this, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act only provides for a federal deduction. It doesn't change the tax for the states. And states some of them have explicitly decoupled from the OBBA offered deductions. So the taxpayers do have to pay state taxes on the amount, regardless of what they can get as a credit on their taxes for the federal when they file. So that's why this gets really confusing. If they come in and want to take that right now, that gets complicated. So that's some of them. Increased 1099 reporting is raised. That's an important one. So you know how we always have to do the 1099s every year, and we teach all the companies, don't forget anything over 600 that you pay generally. That's been increased to $2,000, and that is now going to be automatically indexed for inflation. So that will change each year. And there are some other rules with 1099, but your accountants help you with that. Okay, now we're going to skip to changes in DOL enforcement. So the DOL section, just to give you the PowerPoint numbers, is PowerPoints 33 through, higher than that, 13 through 93. So there's a lot of things broken out here. First, we're going to start with some of the brand new DOL opinions. Then there's the top wage and hour issues we're going to talk about, how to calculate minimum wage and overtime. And we give you lots of samples so you can figure that out yourself and look at those more closely if that's an area, because some of you today are brand new to this, some are advanced on this. So there's different things for different people. We also have information on travel time. That's one of the things we see missed the most, especially in construction. That gets missed a lot as an issue. And then how to conduct wage and hour audits and what to expect. So that's all between the PowerPoints of 13 through 93. So I'm not going to go through all those in detail, but I'm going to highlight a few so then we can move on to some other topics. One thing we're seeing with independent contractors. So you may recall that as whoever's in the presidency changes which direction they want. And so it's been that under Obama and the Biden administrations, they want everyone to be an employee. Under the Trump administration, they're a little more open to having independent contractors. So that's why you see these rules change. And you just have to make sure your agreements and your package with anyone who's an independent contractor actually is updated. You have a written document, you have a file on it, If they have a business card or a website for when they're working for you, put that in the file. They have to have a W-9 signed in the file, but you always want to have an extra agreement too, a written agreement. So those are, I call them independent contractor packages, just so that we have that down. But it does change. There's different factors. So what we did today was go ahead and just put in here, what are some of the key considerations that should be in your agreement? And the way you look at it, if you want to try to fight and justify that they really are an independent contractor. And there's really sort of two types of independent contractors, right? There's one bucket of independent contractors who are people who do ancillary services to your organization. Maybe it's the window washer or the caterer or the cleaning people or something like that, drop off and do the fire extinguishers. Then you have people who may be independent contractors who do sort of your core work. And so those are two different types, and they're looked at differently by the government when they come in. And you can get audits based on unemployment, federal FUTA, workers' comp audits, wage and hour audits, and then obviously the state Department of Revenues and then the IRS. So there's a variety of people who might come in and try to justify this. We've even had DOL start dabbling into this just a little bit, and then they've slowed that down under the Trump administration. But there's different factors. Two core factors are always the degree of control and then the opportunity for profit or loss. So you just want to, how I would view it today is anytime there's a new change in the companies or the administration, you need to go look at your agreements and see if you've got them dialed in. So these few pages just give you some things to think about. Is it really true they're an independent contractor versus an employee? We had one company out there, and this just gives you some to look through on your own, who was just making everybody an independent contractor, even though they're truly an employee. And so the problem with that is they can go in and bring a claim and go back up to 3 years for pay and for other things and have issues if you don't get your classifications right. And so on PowerPoints 49 through 63, we have a whole thing about also classifying people properly as exempt or non-exempt employees, because that's also important. So independent contractor is one category to look at. And then also, are you classifying people right for salaried exempt, white collar positions, they call them, or non-exempt positions such as hourly or salaried non-exempt, where you still have to keep time cards for those. So that's all these categories to kind of look at to protect yourself and manage your risk on that. They also have a proposed joint employer regulation. So April 22nd, DOL issued proposed regulations for determining joint employer under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FMLA, and Migrant and Seasonal Work Protection Act. So basically this rule came about because the Biden administration had rescinded the 2020 rule that dealt with this. So like I said, it goes back and forth. And DOL's goal today, they said, is to create a single nationwide standard to promote uniformity, reduce litigation, clarify these issues. So they're hoping, and then the comment period closes June 22nd. So this, kind of keep an eye on that. Again, it flip-flops with the administrations. And so these are important because sometimes what they were doing, well, I'm getting all the case examples, but they were trying to push companies together if they shared an employee, even if they were not owned, and didn't have common ownership, to try to justify some of these rules to apply. So anyway, this will be helpful if this gets clarified. It's been a little bit nerve-wracking under the last administration as to how they were pushing people together for joint employer. So anyway, hopefully that will get solved, both on a horizontal and vertical joint employment basis. So that just gives you some idea on that. This is some of the factor tests, if that's interesting to you, on PowerPoint 25. And again, remember, as with everything on PowerPoint 26, I always say this: no single factor is dispositive. The determination depends on all the factors in a case. So keep that in mind, and you can have different judges rule differently, as you could imagine. What is the relevance to construction on the joint employer? Well, contractors that use staffing or temporary agencies need to be aware of the rules and audit how much direction they give to the workers that are staffing and leasing, so that they can't be construed as employees. Supervising daily tasks, setting hours, or dictating pay rates risks the joint employer status. General contractors who hire tier subs who directly supervise a sub's work on site are at risk, particularly if they control schedules and conditions. And state laws remain independent, so the federal rule doesn't preempt California, New York, or other states who do already have a broader joint employer standard. So if that's relevant to you, be aware of that. Rescission of the 2024 white collar overtime exemption salary levels, that just changed. So May 14th, 2026, just a short time ago, not even a month. They announced, DOL announced it formally rescinded the 2024 overtime rule that increased the minimum salary levels. What does that mean? It means that if you wanted to count someone as a white collar exempt, they call it, exempt from overtime under the executive, administrative, or professional exemption, they had to make a certain salary level test, and then it's a job duty test. And those become important at times. So if you have, let me give you an example. If you have an assistant superintendent in construction, I'll use that for example, that person may or may not be exempt from overtime. And so they may have the title and be somewhat of a supervisor and you treat them as management. But if they don't meet those qualifications that are outlined on PowerPoints 49 through 63, they have to be doing timesheets, time cards, and you pay overtime. So it just depends on their duties. You can't go by the title alone. And there's categories of executive, administrative, and professional. So like at your companies, like if you have your general manager of the whole operations or director of operations, probably going to qualify as a white collar overtime exemption, don't have to pay overtime. You can pay bonuses and discretionary, do what you want, but you don't do a timesheet, you don't have to, and you don't pay overtime. CFOs would be an executive, or controllers or managers, administrative, professionals, if you have a degreed engineer. So things like that, lawyers, doctors, things like that. Liquidated damages, that just changed on how the wage and hour division is going to address liquidated damages. Now, Heidi and I like this a lot because in all of our DOL cases, when we're always defending companies with Department of Labor across the country, they all had changed the last 10 years saying that they wanted what they call liquidated damages or double damages for any wages that were not paid. So prior to that, it used to be that DOL would come in, they would do the audit, we would do the audit back, we would do some reconstruction because maybe the records weren't valid or DOL says they're not valid even though the employees filled them out. And so what would happen is there'd be an amount that was owed, but there wasn't extra damages on top of it. So what they started about 10 years ago, a little bit over 10, was to double it. So like if you owed somebody $500 because it was miscalculated for their overtime, the government, Department of Labor, doubled that to be an extra 500 in what they call liquidated damages. So the first 500 would be the actual wages, if that was true, and that would be paid with a W-2 with taxes withheld. The second part is called liquidated damages, and that would be $500 extra that's paid as a 1099. So that's how that happened. And then they also added under the Obama administration, they added what's called a civil monetary penalty on top of those now that gets added. So anyway, but this is a change right here. This is a field assistance bulletin. It was only issued last summer, not even 1 year ago. And it has said that DOL will not pursue liquidated damages in administrative settlements. So when we go in and settle with DOL, they won't pursue those. But if they want to pursue it, they have to do it through the judicial process, which does mean they may try to do more court cases when you get a Department of Labor audit than they did in the past. So it just depends. We've had flexibility with the auditors right now at DOL, but just be aware of that's a major change. Now, they also did something else last summer in July. They relaunched the paid program. So if you are finding that you had a company or a subsidiary or something you acquired that had a lot of issues with wage and hour, there is a way to do what's called the paid program, and it allows companies to conduct a self-audit and then pay any back wages due without litigation, without civil monetary penalties, and without liquidated damages. But please seek counsel before doing that and make sure it's right. But this has also been popular to consider as we are asked a lot to clean up companies when they're acquired or going to be acquired, meaning clean up so that they can roll up into a new entity, a global entity, a private equity purchased entity. So they want everything clean, and the banks want it clean by the time that entity is going to be added to a bigger group. So they like to get these things cleaned up. We don't always use the paid program. We sometimes just resolve it once it's discovered. But these are things that are available and sometimes very helpful for the acquirer doesn't want to have outstanding liability. So keep in mind, it'll cover a 2-year period, and you have to report the findings to DOL with supporting evidence of the methodology used. So there's a whole process to it. Just again, seek legal advice before just doing it. But it is a helpful tool. We're glad to see it come back. There are circumstances it can work great on. And it reminds us all, it's really important to do self-audits. That's the biggest thing I can pitch today is we're trying to give you tools with all these PowerPoints on doing audits yourself. and trying to do it before the government comes knocking. You'll always be in better place. And plus, it allows you to strengthen your policies, your practices, your reviews of things. And we have to be ready for that. So this section on PowerPoint 33 through about, that's when it goes to 93, teaches you all about doing the wage and hour internal audit. So again, I'm going to go through these kind of quick. Don't worry that I'm flying by fast. You're going to have all these PowerPoints. We like to share information so that you can learn. But this is the section to go to if you feel like you've got some issues or you need to tighten something up, or you're considering rolling your company up into purchase someday by someone and be a bit part of a bigger group. To scale it up, you have to have these things in order. There's no question. I-9s have to be in order. E-Verify has to be in order if you use it. Government contract work and wage and hour and DOL are some of the biggest areas that have to be dialed in. So what are the top wage and hour issues we see? Misclassification, as I mentioned, of non-exempt employees as salaried exempt when they do not meet the duties test. So that means you'd have to pay overtime back to 3 years. Misclassification of employees as independent contractors. We talked about that. You got to have an independent contractor kit. One of the most common ones, and you'd be surprised, automatic deductions for meal periods not recorded on the time card. So if your company has payroll just automatically say everyone has to take a 30-minute lunch, and they tell everybody to do that, and then they just in payroll deduct the 30 minutes because they're supposed to, that's an automatic issue. And DOL always says, okay, you're doing that, but we're going to go back 3 years, 2.5 hours per week, which is overtime if they're working 40 hours. So it adds up to a lot of money fast. So that's kind of like low-hanging fruit for Department of Labor. So don't do that. So you have to figure that out differently. Off the clock work is a big one. No one should be working off the clock ever. Probably in construction, landscape industries, what do we see there? If people are required to report to the yard before they go out to the job site, they'll make claims sometimes that they were working as soon as they went to the yard, not when they started at the work site. So sometimes what we do is do a voluntary carpool policy, and we have to make sure the foreman, whoever's driving them, knows not to ask them to get ice or pick up gas at the or food at the convenience store as they start their day, because otherwise they have to be paid. And you can pay a different rate for drive time, so that's always available too. Failure to have accurate time cards signed by employees is a big deal. They have to show the start and stop time, any unpaid meal breaks, and they have to be over 30 minutes for that, and they actually have to do no work during that time. But you can't put in like 8 hours a day or things like that. That's, we always, when people ask us to do an audit, I'll say, just send me a few, and we'll pick a random month and items. We like to look at the time card and the paycheck and see, and then what are they turning in as a crew that relates to that, to get to those numbers and then see if there's problems. So it's easy to audit that and kind of start seeing patterns of issues. Failure to track hours and pay overtime to piece rate workers or day rate. So piece rate is very popular. If you do it, you still have to keep track of time sheets, time records, time cards. You can do electronic. You can do a net, a global net on it. A GPS network, net on it. So you can do any number of things, security cameras, to keep track of when people actually work and things. But please be careful that you always pay the overtime. Now, overtime on piece rate is half time. It's not time and a half. So it's half time. So remember that piece rate's half time. And there's a whole formula in here on how to do that. The failure to include non-discretionary bonuses in the calculation of regular rate for overtime calculations is also going to be a problem. Child labor has all of a sudden propped up quite a bit. And so that has a lot of consequences to it. And there seems to be a pattern right now in the last year where we're seeing kids under 18 being working in America, coming across the borders with fake IDs, and they're minors. So that brings up an OSHA safety issue. So I'm seeing it in excavation, really dangerous, and other places. But they are not old enough, but you don't always know it from the photo and the ID. So you have to be really careful about that, because DOL held a company liable that we fought about because they had no knowledge about it, and they had all the documentation. They were doing everything right, and the workers turned out to be 16 and 17. But DOL has access to things that obviously a company doesn't. When they're presented all the documents, presented ID documents, did I-9s, did all the steps, they had no idea that they were young. Just be careful about that. And then the other couple of them are just failure to pay non-exempt employees for meetings or trainings. If you bring people in to do training, you need to pay them. Incorrect or no payment for travel time. unlawful deductions from wages, such as deductions for tools or uniforms that put the employee's wage below minimum wage. So that can be a problem. Or government contract wage for prevailing wage. You have to pay the prevailing wage. You can't reduce that. So those are a couple things to look at. Now, when we say that, we went to 11 instead of 10. You know, again, all the things that follow talk about these. So I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but PowerPoints 37 through 40 just go through your minimum wage, your overtime, how it works. Government contractor wages keep changing. So, you know, they were one thing in 25 and then they're one thing in 26. Anyway, this is a good checklist to go through and audit your own records. It talks about how to do overtime, reminder about California, for example, over 8 hours a day is overtime. And then the other thing that we did, then the independent contractors, and then let's see, all the tests, that's why we put that in here. The best practices I did want to touch on. So PowerPoint 47 and 48 talk about the best practices if you're going to use independent contractors. So the first one I already mentioned is a written agreement signed by them, an integrated package, copy of a contractor license, a signed W-9 form is critical. You've got to have that to even have a chance to argue the defense. If they're supposed to be independent in a company, they should have workers' comp and liability insurance. You can ask for that. You can have an independent contractor checklist to demonstrate the factors that show the status. And if they have copies of business cards, business license number, anything like that, stick it all in the folder, because if someone comes and asks about all this from the government, there's a variety of agencies that do. When we're able to roll out, you have a system and here's the documents, it just goes so much better. Okay, this was the exempt or non-exempt section, so you guys can use that. It's PowerPoints 49 through 63. And this is the one where we go through, do they meet the salary basis at a minimum salary level, which just got lowered again because the Trump administration just issued that order. Highly paid employee exemption, and then the job duties. Are they executive, administrative, professional, or creative? And if they are, then you don't have to pay overtime to those people. But you need to be careful that when you're doing an audit, I usually tell people just do a list of all your employees, what their job titles are, and then the column that says how are they paid. Are they P for piece rate, H for hourly, SNE for salaried non-exempt, meaning they don't get overtime, or SE for salaried exempt, meaning even though it's the front office person that helps out, they have to be paid overtime and they have to do a timesheet. So there's different categories, and that'll help you look at job titles. That's what DOL looks at. They just get a list of employees. They look at their job title, they look at that classification, and then they look at their pay and a sample of their time cards and sheets and things, and they figure that out. And then they always are going to, anything with the word assistant in it, they're going to always go and say, I want to look at that closer. I don't think that they're a manager then if you're counting them as exempt or whatever it is. So keep in mind the word assistant always raises if they're salaried exempt or not being paid overtime. They're always going to look further. Okay, so this gives you all the rules on that. So I'm not going to go through all these, you can just compare them and checklist it to what you're doing at each company, and you'll be able to figure this out. So keep that in mind. So executive, administrative, these are the categories. Executive is always the primary duty, management of the enterprise, customarily and regularly directs the work of two or more, authority to hire and fire. So this breaks it all down. So you just got to look at each category, and I should go backward. Administrative, primary duty is office or non-manual work related to the management or general business operations, exercise of discretion, independent judgment. So anyway, you just go through and you figure it out. Now, the next one. So that's one of your audit challenges today to go do. The next one is requirements to pay overtime. How do you pay overtime? Again, I mentioned piece rate. I bring that up because we get so many audits over that. And the government always challenges it and tries to, and the guys always say, oh, I worked 60, 70 hours a week. So we have to show that they didn't, and we have to show we have a system. And I just want to make sure you all know, we wanted to put these in here so you all know how to calculate them when you go back and look at it. Because sometimes you may need to change your business model, or you're implementing a business model and you want to make sure it's as strong and compliant as it can be. So this will teach you step by step what to do. This shows you how to compute the regular rate of pay on PowerPoint 65. How do you calculate the regular rate and overtime for two different job rates? This shows you on PowerPoint 66. We broke it all out for you. The piece rate is PowerPoint 67, and you see bold all, right there in the middle. The employee has to complete a time card to be piece rate. And we don't care that they leave in the daytime for 4 hours to go get their driver's license or pick up their kids. They just need to be accurate on their time card that they left at noon and didn't come back till 6 that night to finish up. We don't want them being casual about that. That's really key. And this is an example on PowerPoint 68 of the piece rate overtime. And then another category is discretionary and non-discretionary bonuses. I like to always mention them because a discretionary bonus is meaning like you're throwing money down the hall. Everybody's doing great. We're all doing great. Here's money. That does not count as overtime for that money. But non-discretionary, whether it's a production bonus or if you work so many hours or you do certain things, then you have to count that as the regular rate of pay for overtime. So no good deed goes unpunished. Be careful about that. So PowerPoint 69, 70, 71, 72. Anyway, they talk a little bit about the bonuses if you use them and how do you make them. If you don't want to pay overtime, you have to be careful about that. How do you push them into discretionary, which is harder because sometimes you want to do a production bonus, but that's non-discretionary. And that's fine to do as long as you do your calculations right. So that's what PowerPoint 72 talks about is a production bonus. Like if you pay a crew bonus from money left over on a labor budget for a house project or some construction project, or you pay an employee bonus if they meet certain production goals. So you have to figure that out and then make sure that that's counted into the regular rate to determine the overtime. And remember again, I know I'm telling you guys a lot of stuff fast, but in paying people overtime, piece rate is half time, not 1.5, because you've already paid for all hours worked. If someone works 50 hours a week and they got paid whatever they get on the piece, that covered straight time for all their hours. So it's only half time owed on the amount of hours over 40. So hopefully that, and our formulas show you that, but I just like to kind of repeat that. It's a little bit tricky. Okay, here's an example on PowerPoint 74 of overtime with production bonus. So we really did take the time to put these together to help so you can figure them out. And don't just trust the computer programs that are out there. You should do your own audit, even if you have electronic programs. You think, oh, I've got all these electronic programs and they're big companies and it'll be fine. That's not always true. And you always should do a manual check of electronic programs. Whether we're talking about I-9 programs, we have a lot of problems with those being wrong. And even on payroll discrepancies sometimes. So just check it. It's a good thing to do. Helps everyone learn and it helps you remember what's supposed to happen. Make sure they track hours. Best practice is to have everyone sign a statement verifying the accuracy of their hours each week. If you can do that by phone or by payroll or signing, whatever. Let's see what else here is. Oh, smartphone apps are popular, whatever you want to use. Make sure, though, if you use a phone program for your payroll or time in and time out, that there is a PIN system for that person only or facial recognition or something. So the supervisor just can't go fill it out all the time because that does the same problem for you. Because if the supervisor does it, then you don't have a way to track it and figure it out. And then they're just going to Department of Labor will throw out all those records. That's why we don't like that. I want to stop on PowerPoint 78 a minute. A good practice is item number 7 on PowerPoint 78. So above that, we say make sure they sign it. But the other one is having your policies that people are supposed to review their pay cards and paychecks and within 7 days of getting a paycheck or 14, whatever you want to use. And then if they have questions, they go to HR or payroll so they can be addressed. So have a procedure in place to investigate and have people bring it forward if they think it's wrong. And sometimes employees just don't understand. Piece rate's hard. They think they're being taken advantage of. You just don't want them running the Department of Labor if you can sit and talk with them and help them understand why it's correct. So have a process where they go to somebody that in HR payroll preferably. You should always routinely audit. PowerPoint 79 talks about that. Routinely audit and look at your records at your company and make sure that they're right. It helps you make sure things are accurate. So important to do. I'm sorry about that. Okay, what else? Number 11 on PowerPoint 81, DOL will often rely on the employee's testimony of how many hours they worked off the clock. Even though you've got all these records and you're trying to do everything and keep records and force them to do it the right way, DOL will interview them and then think, oh, they're all wrong. So anyway, that's very frustrating to the management teams and administrative teams at companies when they try so hard to have everybody follow the rules and fill out things and do it right. So here's a couple recommendations on PowerPoint 82. Just a reminder, have supervisors count and record the number of workers on a project to compare to time cards. So you make sure you have no ghost employees and that you really do have the right number of workers that day and those kind of things. And sometimes we've had supervisors keep a separate log and they just turn in handwritten time of when it started and ended as extra evidence, which is more work, but it's to try to help corroborate the records. Require workers to show identification to get checks to confirm no worker gets more than one check. We have those issues all the time. Consider electronic timekeeping with biometrics or photos to show the same individuals not getting two paychecks. And ensure the employees review and sign time records. So those are just some ideas. These aren't, it's always different. PowerPoint 83 through 88, I'm not going to go through all that, but please look at these for travel time. A lot of times people are doing these wrong. Home to work commutes, not generally work time. Time spent traveling between work sites after you start your day is to be paid. But the last day, the last job going home would not be necessarily. Where people get caught up is in these overnight trips and how do you deal with it? And what if they go drive out of the main area of where they work? And then there's some special issues raised by Davis-Bacon Act for federal contractors. So, just kind of look through this. How does travel time work from the yard to the job site? And, what can you do to help avoid an issue there? So anyway, those are just some reminders. And the last thing on DOL is PowerPoints 89 through 93. This is a nice step-by-step on how to conduct a self-audit. So all the things are here for the tools for you to do it. We've kind of told you what the issues are, gave you some depth on all of it. And then this is a nice little wrap-up section to just go through and do your audit. It's not always the funnest thing, but it's important because what you do now can protect you and your company and the risks if the government comes knocking, for sure. And if DOL does an audit, they're going to provide a notice. They'll give you a time. They'll have a letter. But a lot of times today, Department of Labor changed their procedures a lot in the last, I don't know how many years now, a few years. And they have already generally observed job sites, recorded number of workers, recorded workers' license plate data, recorded hours that persons are on the job site before they even give notice to you. So keep in mind, they'll be out there doing things before they have that first meeting in the opening conference where they start asking questions. We always recommend having legal counsel involved in DOL audits. It's a lot of money. And with the doubling with the liquidated damages and then the civil monetary penalties, they like to get up to $1 million really quick. So we do suggest having legal counsel to help you with these processes when you have the Department of Labor knocking on your door with a formal process. They do interview employees sometimes. They review paperwork, they do subpoenas, they have a closing conference, back wage compliance and payment agreement or legal challenge. All these things are just the steps. So anyway, we put them all in here. Probably 93 is the one to remember, PowerPoint 93. These are the remedies and penalties. They can go 3 years back. They can do civil monetary penalties up to $2,500 apiece, which really needs to be removed and reduced, but it's adjusted annually, which we don't like. And then child labor violations can be up to $145,000 if a repeat violation or a minor was injured or killed. So be very careful. They're really focusing on child labor because it seems to have cropped up. Okay, we're going to switch really quick to OSHA for just a minute. Not going to say much other than be careful, have policies. Here's a sample they did. There's national. There's one in Arizona they did. I always say people were not holding people back on shade or water anywhere in California, in the West, anywhere. But what really, to me, matters on, I will say this, on the heat items, what matters is teaching. I would do a toolbox talk once a year. It's what I would do if it's my company. It's what I try to teach the guys out in the field. And teach them, don't drink Red Bull when you're feeling dehydrated. Don't drink, caffeine. I mean, what you need is watermelon, water, milk, and water has to be with electrolytes, and you have to have food to help balance that the salt. So that's what people don't understand. If you have a diabetic working in construction, they'll want to grab a Red Bull when they're starting to feel weak, thinking that's going to help them. It'll do the opposite effect and dehydrate them. And we've had this happen. So just teaching those kind of things are much more helpful than drink water and shade. You got to have electrolytes, you got to have food, or it doesn't work. But people don't realize milk is one of the top hydrating items for you. And watermelon is good too. So anyway, just things to teach about. Let's see. 10 most cited OSHA violations. I just put those in there as a reminder on page 99 and 100. Fall protection is still number one. I've dealt with that nationally for decades now. It's still number one, but surprisingly, hazard communication. No one knows to have that policy and train on it, or at least they teach them and the guys forget when they're asked questions by OSHA. Ladders are still our probably most unsafe issue on a job site that you can get hurt on. So watch for that. And then there's some others here that you can just see and go through the list to see how you're doing. Handbooks and policies, just wanted to cover. Please make sure to look at those handbooks. Don't use things directly from AI. It is not working well. They've been, as I said, seeded by unions and by plaintiffs and others. So what's coming out from the AI is something that's pro-employee and gives them rights, and people don't realize it. And again, we're defending lawsuits right now where people borrowed from AI, didn't have someone look at it who knew the area of law with employment or legal contracts or agreements, and then this is what happened. And now they have suits over it. So be careful about AI. It can be helpful, but it can also be very harmful too. But this is just a list. So what we did is we put a list. Sexual harassment has gone by the wayside. It's called anti-harassment, anti-discrimination, no retaliation. But just go through this list and see what you have in your book. At will is important. Are these policies and handbooks? We're updating them all the time. We don't like progressive discipline in them. We like to have always be that you have the right to discipline up to and including termination for any violation, first time or not. But as a good practice, you try to teach your supervisors to be verbally counseling, writing people up, doing things, but you don't want to be restricted by that, where you can't fire someone for the first incident either. We like to have a lot of employee acknowledgement forms. On page 105, we talk about that. I like to have them on. They sign on the respect at work, anti-harassment, anti-discrimination policy, surveillance and monitoring. So if you have cameras or other devices, they've signed off on that. Drug and alcohol testing, that they've signed off on that, and that it also includes a release. So if it's a hospital or someone else who does the test, you can get a copy of it. Background checks, even if you don't do them, it's good to have them signed as part of it. We have a whole bunch. We like a lot of things signed, and they help you everywhere, with judges, with courts, with unemployment hearings. Just it's better than just one big book and just one little signature and nobody sees it again. So the policies are good to have around too. All right, a couple more quick things. Remember, we get a lot of EEOC discrimination, harassment, retaliation charges. Remind people in your, once a year, do a toolbox talk on remembering respect at work, no inappropriate comments or conduct based on age. It means age 40 and over, surprisingly. No balding, no old man, no viejo. Race, national origin, ethnicity, ancestry, religion. Sorry, I'm just going through the list. Disability, they think sex, gender, marital status. That is something you need to do once a year and do a toolbox talk and get it signed off in your system. And then I would do it at orientation so that you're marking that on your list. You taught them then at that time as well. And then have a process where we've kind of gone away from, say, report to your supervisor. We want to report to HR or someone like that, or the general manager, so it's handled correctly, because sometimes the supervisors ignore it or don't really know what to do. It's not their area. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to go through all of this, but again, you don't retaliate in any way. Obviously, that has a higher charge on retaliation than just than the issue of alleged discrimination or harassment that occurred. The EEOC process, we just pop that in here so you know the process. There's 300 days if someone wants to file a charge. It's a federal agency, or they can file with the state, and there's a process for that. Let's see. I'm not going to go through all this right now. Now we're going to talk about immigration I-9 enforcement. I'm hoping a lot of people want to hear that, because we like to say it saves you a lot of money in this area if you fix these or address them or look at them and are proactive about it. So there's been a lot going on with immigration, as you can watch the media. There have been a lot of DHS, or Department of Homeland Security, has been revoking or terminating the temporary protected status for many countries. And if you have E-Verify, they're popping it on the front of the dashboard, and you don't even know to go look for it sometimes. But they are changing things all the time. So if you have temporary protected status, individuals working and their cards show that, then you need to pay attention to it. It was last updated, I guess it was status change report on May 5th, 2026. So you just go in, if you use E-Verify, so first of all, not everyone does, but if you do, you can go right in there and it will tell you what has changed. But here's our recommendations. So this is what I would do if it was my company. This is a way to protect yourself on I-9s and be ahead of the curve. First, you want to conduct an internal I-9 review. Now, we have been teaching this for decades, and it seems that people did a really good job 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and then they've got new people in there and no one's looked at in a while, and now we're seeing the same repeat problems all over again that were already fixed many, many years earlier. So please look at that and take it serious, because either you can do it, people like us and others can do it, but it's do it is the question. Do it, and you've got all the tools in here today. There's a lot of things you can look at. Train employees who complete Section 2 at your companies, and that are filling out those I-9s. It's really good to have a certificate of training or a class with them so they understand what to do. They also feel confident. It's okay to do these I-9s, and not be afraid of them, because if you do it all right and you look and touch and feel the real card and fill it out, you're fine. You can't know if something's totally counterfeit if you don't know. But if it's misspelled or someone's calling it in from the field and saying, hey, just write it down right now, I'm reading it, I'm holding it in my hand, that can't be done. The person who actually signs Section 2 of the I-9 has to be the person who touches and feels the real card and sees the person in front of them to make sure it looks like them in the photo. So that's important. And then they can sign off and it's all fine. And you only do one from list A or one from B and C, not A, B, and C, not A and C. That's a violation. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is you can't ask the person to show you like a social security card and a driver's license. That's against the law too. You have to let them choose from the list A, B, and C. You can put out there the A, B, and C in English and Spanish. They can choose from that, but they do have to choose. You can say things like, you can show us one document from list A, which might be a passport or a visa or something, or an employee authorization card. Or you can show us one from B and C, which might be a driver's license, a state ID card, Native American card under B, or item C might be a social security card or a birth certificate with a raised seal. You can say it that way, but better to just show them the documents in English and Spanish or whatever language and let them look at it. Number 3 is train managers and supervisors how to respond if ICE serves a notice of inspection or conducts a raid or has a warrant for the arrest of an employee. We have a responding to government investigation memo that helps with that. But we help our own teams of supervisors and managers if we teach them ahead of time. Hopefully the problem never happens, but teaching people ahead of time gives them confidence, gives them comfort, gives them time to think, and they make better decisions when the situation does arise, if it does. Don't refuse to hire people or otherwise discriminate against foreign nationals that have a temporary work authorization. You can't do that. You can't prefer a foreign national over a U.S. worker. That's against the law. So here's a few tips. So this part you may want to go through. The I-9 PowerPoint sections are 123 all the way down to, let me see, we put a lot in here, to about 196. So there's a lot here to flip through and read. It's kind of a train the trainer approach. I-9 started in November 6, 1986. So if you happen to be a company that's been in business that long, if they don't have a person's worked for you that long, used to be all the time we had this issue, maybe not so much anymore. They don't have to have an I-9. So that's where that comes from, unless they go work on a military base or a government contract job, things like that. Remember that the Form I-9, please watch when the new ones come into being, because no one always tells you, and then it's a violation if you use the wrong I-9 form. So the current version of the Form I-9 has a revised date of 1/20/2025 at the bottom left, and at the top right, it'll say expires 5/31/2027. So please watch that, because if you use an older version, that's a violation. So, and there's ways we'll tell you when you do an audit of how to address these. What we usually say is go do an audit, first do an employee list of everybody in your company, match up that you have an I-9 for every single one. You're not allowed to keep them with the personnel files. I-9s have to be kept separate. And then you go through those I-9s and figure out, there's usually 3 piles. One pile will be the one that's perfect. One pile will be the one that's not right, but you can't fix it. Maybe they didn't fill it out on their first day of work and sign it, or something's wrong that we can't fix. Maybe they're no longer here. The third one are ones you can fix today. You don't backdate them. You date them today with a single strike through, and you date and initial them. And they may have a technical minor defect that you can fix, like they forgot to put the data higher, and it's right in your payroll system. You're allowed to go at it and initial and date it right there, but don't put any other extraneous marks on it. Don't write a memo to the file, nothing else. So that's that. You've seen the section 1s. I'm not going to go through all these, but they're here if you want to go back and refresh. The employee fills out those section 1, or if they have a translator, they fill out the section on translation. What else can I tell you about that? Post office boxes are now permitted but not preferred. They used to be banned, but that really was targeting people who live in rural areas or Native Americans and stuff. So anyway, that's now available again. Email addresses and phone numbers are optional by the employee on Section 1. If they do put it in, they do get calls and stuff from the government from those forms. Employers on this one, employee may not request documents to verify the information in Section 1. So when they fill out Section 1, that's the employee filling it all out. You don't ask for things. You just make sure it's completely filled out. That's really what it is. And they sign and date it. And again, you can do electronic I-9s, just make sure that it has a PIN and it's secure to that person. So they can't say that you filled it out. And then supplement A is the preparer translator. That needs to be filled out. So that's important. You no longer have to check the box whether they did or didn't use one, but you do have to fill out the form if they need a translator. So keep that in mind. And then this is the part I mentioned on PowerPoint 132 about list A or B and C. It's not across the board. You overzealous, they call it. If you put A, B, and C, that's a problem. So just A or B and C, not both. And that's why it says that above there where you see where it says list A and the word or B and C. So keep that in mind. And at the bottom is where we have the first day of employment right there, and then the last name, first name, and title of person filling it out, the signature. And basically it's, did they touch, the real answer here is it a document appear to relate to the person, and did you touch and fill the real document? So then you can sign it. There's not a problem with that. The employee's first day needs to be completed on the first day, but the employer can fill out within 3 days the documents, but it's a good idea to do it all on the first day if you can get that habit. And make sure you have a second person in the office kind of look it over and help. If you use E-Verify, PowerPoint 135 talks about that. There's additional information box that allows you to record the E-Verify number. So now you can put that one extra thing on there and it's got a box for it. Again, what's the employer's duty? Well, on PowerPoint 136, it's to touch and review the original document, determine if it reasonably appears to be genuine or relate to them. Photocopies are not acceptable. Also look for misspelling or the photo not matching the person or the age being significantly different, like it's a kid bringing in his grandfather's card, stuff like that. Re-verification, rehire is here. I won't get through all that, but it's here. This one's important on PowerPoint 144. You need to have a tickler system at your companies for expiring temporary work authorization. So we don't have to keep track of U.S. passports that expire or driver's license that expire or permanent resident alien cards that expire, but you do have to for temporary or for EADs that are visas that have an expiration on them. And I usually like what we teach is a minimum of a 90, 60, and 30-day letter that goes out, and it's going to pop up 4 months in advance. You can start reminding the person they can't work 1 day past the date, okay, that their card expires. They just can't. So they have to get that fixed. So we need to remind them way early to go do that if they can get it renewed or whatever documents, if they have other documents to show, they can use that. They don't have to use the same document to fill out the I-9 update. What about Social Security cards and documents like that and receipts? So for receipts or replacement cards, these are your rules. For those, be careful about that. There are receipts you can get for replacement or lost card. Applying for Social Security card does not count to use it as a Social Security card. That has to be just for replacement cards, and they're valid for 90 days, for example, for a receipt for Social Security. Companies should have a tickler system for receipts as well. Number 3, item 3 on PowerPoint 146. That's important. Top errors that create I-9 liability. And then I know we're wrapping up soon. Sorry about that, Brian. Almost there. But here's a couple other last things I wanted to share. So types of I-9 errors. There's technical, procedural, we call it, or substantive. During a first audit, employers many times get to correct the technical procedure errors, and substantive errors are subject to fines. But technical errors may result in fines in your second audit. Now they're coming out with a thing saying they might even target you for technical audits in your first audit. So it's really important to get these done before they come knocking, because they just updated this new area on PowerPoint 149. It's a new fact sheet. They didn't make a public announcement. And they're, it's frustrating because now they're saying the first time your technical errors, which were minor and usually could be fixed within 10 days if there was an audit, but they just quietly updated it on March 16th, 2026. No public comment, no nothing. So it's more dangerous than ever before because they made technical or procedural now substantive. So if you use the Spanish form I-9, you can't use that anywhere except in Puerto Rico. You can have it there for people to refer to, but that's been a problem where people have been filling it out. So anyway, you can look through some of these to see the kind of things that'll be missing, and they're all citations, they're all dollar amounts. So that's why we really, really encourage everyone. This is like doing homework, like we're back in elementary school. Everything has to be filled out, everything has to be correct, and you have to use the right Form I-9. You have to have the physical address. I mean, just every single box has to be done. So anyway, this just explains some of that. The recommendations: do a self audit. Can't say it enough. Um, and some of the tips is that, let me see what else. We had a few more things here. There's corrections, how to do them. You don't block it all out or white out any corrections. You just draw a single line so the auditor can read what is, and that's what talks about on 160. They can read what's underneath and then what you initialed and dated it. And if you had substantive errors, you'll need to do a new I-9 form and date it all today, except the higher date will be back in time. And that'll be clipped to the old one that's incomplete. But it has to be perfect. The employee has to come back in. You have to see the documents, the whole process. So it's unfortunately more work now. They just changed this in March. More items are going to be substantive where they need a new I-9 form sometimes. Additional recommendations for self-audit. Again, don't use whiteout, don't scribble out. Always initial date the corrections. Cross out the incorrect, write in the correct, but don't black it out. They want to see what's underneath it. It's really important that way. And if you do a brand new I-9 form, do not backdate the I-9 form. That always gets you in trouble. And you just clip the two together. I don't know if you stable, but clip them so that the old one that's wrong and the new one that's fully completed together, and don't make extraneous notes, but make sure the new I-9, if you had to do one, is 100% correct. The auditors at ICE are much more difficult with you if you took the time to see there was a problem with the first one, you did the second one, and you didn't get it right, and you made a bunch of mistakes. That's a huge problem. So keep that in mind. Let's see, what else was another one? The USCIS, that's the ICE agency, prefers that employers correct existing I-9s rather than completing a new form. But if the employer does create a new one, you clip them together and not backdate the form. But it depends on what it is. So I would get help on that. Don't just make a random decision on that. And then E-Verify during the self-audit. You also need to do E-Verify. We have a lot of E-Verify audits. You do have to follow that. You have to follow the timeline on the dashboard and make sure somebody's using it. And then I'll wrap up with electronic I-9s. I think that's all we'll do today. There's more in the packet that you can read about, but the thing I want to say about electronic I-9s, we've had a lot of issues with this. And it's been very frustrating. It's PowerPoints 166 to 172. Not all the electronic I-9 forms are correct out there. They have to have on PowerPoint 168 the associated audit trails and reports, and they have to match the USCIS ICE government requirement. And they don't. And we have a lawsuit pending right now over this issue for a poor client being charged $250,000 because they paid a big national firm to handle their electronic I-9s, and the audit trails didn't work, or they migrated them at some point in the time and they don't have access in the same way with the audit trails. And that is a huge problem. And if you look at your contracts, we always suggest look at your contracts with staffing agencies with electronic I-9. They sometimes only give you a credit of like a month or two of service. They don't pay the bill. So it becomes an issue. You got to really, handing it off for electronic I-9 does not necessarily mean you're safe at all. I know Heidi and I have fixed a lot of national electronic I-9 programs. They didn't know they had a problem. And then they came and we showed them all the issues for the client and they're like, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're fixing it right now. So they just don't know, that's a lot of it. It happens. On PowerPoint 169, make sure your electronic signatures follow the Electronic Signatures Act. And this just gives you guidance again on the electronic I-9. And the elements of electronic audit trail are on PowerPoint 171. Critical, critical, critical. So if you have electronic I-9, you've got to do this extra step and do the audit. You will thank us later, like the client is getting a $250,000 bill that we're trying to fight right now. The penalties for insufficient audit trails are high. Again, they're 2,861 for every I-9 form that the audit trail wasn't matching right or wasn't available. So, 100 employees who have it wrong because the audit trail for the system didn't work is 286,000 just on that alone. So be careful about that. Okay, I'm not going to go through all this, but the rest of these are tips for completing the I-9. Please read that if you'd like a little guidance on that. That's 173 to 185. Again, use ink, things like that, no whiteout, all those things. I've covered some of this stuff. Let me see if there's anything else on there. Oh, do not accept Social Security cards as a List B document if they say valid for work, or List C document, if they say valid for work only with DHS authorization, not valid for employment. They may have another document that works. You just have to say, hey, I can't accept this as your list document, a List C document, but can you give us something else, or do you have something else? And they often do. I mentioned the photocopies. This is the other thing. PowerPoint 184, retention. Your I-9s, you always keep the current employee I-9 forms, but when people leave your employment, we kind of teach people to keep the payroll records and personnel files for 7 years and then you shred. Not I-9 forms. They go in a separate stack. You only keep them a max of 3 years, and it's either 3 years, 2 years, and 1 year, depending on what their it sounds so crazy, how long they worked for your company. So that's the story there. All right. And I think, let me see if I think that's about it. I don't want to overwhelm you. Yeah, we've overwhelmed you a bit. We don't mean to overwhelm you. We're trying to help you. But on PowerPoint 185 is just recommendations regarding the I-9 forms, training, self-audit, have an anti-discrimination policy, record keeping, and consistency. That's usually the best thing. These are the kind of fines we're talking about, is $2,800 a piece, and it's increasing annually. So it really, really matters to save money and do this right now. And then obviously, if someone comes in and tells you they're not authorized to work, you got to do an investigation, and they can't be working there if that's the case. And that's a whole nother round of offenses, which we didn't even get into that. There's so many things, or harboring people. If you're paying for apartments and driving them in white vans and helping them like that, or living on site, you can run a risk. And so please be careful about that. If ICE does an audit, they will come and drop the notice off. We have 72 hours to respond, get legal help right away. Don't waive the 72 hours. You have to keep copies of all the documents you provide to ICE. We always get a receipt for all of them. And this just goes through 192, through a couple of PowerPoints of what happens if ICE comes knocking. We spend a lot of time on the internal audit. That's most important. But when they come, they look for all these things, and they'll give you notices, and then we have to let people go within so many days when you get the notice of suspect documents. Okay, I think that has got to be the end of it. Oh, and you have to have a crisis communication plan when ICE comes in, because sometimes it may shut your business down for a while. It may be your customers get concerned. Your bankers want to know what to do. We have a whole system on all that, but you just prepare ahead of time, and you'll be fine. And you can't discriminate under the law. So I'm going to stop there. There's a few more things on E-Verify and E-Verify audits on PowerPoints 201 to 213. And we did add in a little bonus package on PowerPoints 214 to 245, are just things related to what are some of the best practices for hiring and orientation, and what about performance reviews and counseling and discipline and termination. So our goal today, and Brian is so gracious to have us on, for Foundation Software, is to help everyone understand and prevent problems, or at least have the best defense, because you've had enough information to try to help you. So I'll close there. I know Heidi's been answering questions, and I'll turn it back over to Brian. And thank you guys for caring and being there, and taking care of things to manage risks at your companies. It's really important. All right, Brian.
Wow, that's a lot of information in a very short period of time. I've been just watching the questions pour in, and Heidi's been doing an amazing job answering a ton of them. So Heidi, thank you so much. We do have a few minutes to go through a couple questions. I don't want to keep everybody too long, but we still have 327 people on board with us. So I think we need to spend a few minutes.
Sure.
I see a lot of clapping going on.
Yay,
here.
we like clapping. I'm sorry we went so fast, but there's just a lot we like to download to everybody. So thank you.
There's a ton. And again, everybody, you will be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint along with a link to the recorded presentation when the email goes out here within the next 24 hours or so. So just keep an eye out for that and go from there. If we don't get to your questions, those questions are there. Heidi, Julie, if you have time to go through and answer some of those offline, it's fine as well.
Okay,
so
great.
We'll start here at the bottom. Regarding a payroll audit from a union, when they ask for the company general ledger, does it need to include income accounts? I see Foundation has a nice option to remove income accounts.
Well, we always, very good. I like the Foundation has that option. That's awesome. We have a lot of discussion and negotiation with Department of Labor on what is provided, when we provide it. I get very uncomfortable, as we all do, when they start asking for your ledgers, all kinds of data and information. And we try to narrow it as much as we can. So it's good if you have options on the system to narrow. We like to push them to have confidentiality agreements, protective orders. We like to sometimes, we've even pushed them on a data room that they can only look at it there and not take it and get used by other agencies, but it doesn't always work. I'll tell you that. But they look at it for, in their minds, very legitimate reasons. They're trying to find out if there's 1099s being paid to workers that aren't showing up on your payroll, or there's a side business or side book business. So they have all these, statements they make why. But anyway, that's the story. So try to narrow as much as you can. That's the goal.
Yeah. And Julie, can I say,
Yeah,
if it's like the union, if you're a union employer and it's the union doing your payroll audit for like benefits purposes and things like that, the answer is it depends, but generally, we would say take that out at least initially and see if they push back. It could depend on what your actual documents say, but under ERISA, trustees can examine records that are reasonably necessary to verify the payroll. So it comes down to whether there's something in those records that are required for them to verify the payroll records. So if you just give them payroll records and you take out and the general ledger and take out that income revenue account, and they're still able to verify all of their contributions, then that should satisfy it.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Oh, and Brian, I saw one question there. We can, if we want to, do we have to keep copies of A or B and C documents? That's a good question. If you don't mind me jumping on that, answering that one. That's a complicated one. So I've been doing it 30 years, and I don't like the documents to get used against our employers and their staffs in their payroll and HR. So I prefer that you have a system in place that fills out the I-9 form, electronic or manual. And then and I like to have a second set of eyes in the office on it, so they've double checked the work too. And then get rid of the A and B, C documents, shred them. There's no reason to have them. If you use E-Verify, you have to keep the documents for E-Verify, the one that's used on the EAD that matches the computer. But the rest you don't need to keep unless you have another compelling reason. If you do keep them, you have to keep them with the I-9. You can't just put them in a separate file. Now, if you keep a driver's license for OSHA safety records, that's different. But the ones used for this, I've had so many times in audits that they get used against the employer and they threaten the HR person. Didn't you see the name was spelled wrong? Couldn't you tell it was a counterfeit document? No, they couldn't. They accepted what was a genuine, reasonable document. And if those photocopies weren't there, they wouldn't be questioned. So I have to think about it as protection a little bit. Have your systems, those kind of things. There's some cases where it does help us, but most of the time, if you can get a good system down, it's going to protect your company in the long run.
How about this one? Can an employer use an employee's available sick hours automatically when an employee calls in sick, or should the employer wait for the employee to request it?
That's a good question. It's going to kind of depend on your policies, but generally if someone's sick, they can use their sick time. If they're sick for more than 3 days, you may get a doctor's note. There's a whole world of dealing with the ADA, the FMLA, the workers' comp, all these medical questions, and then state laws. That's like a whole program in itself. It's very complicated. It is the most missed item with the most, I find, complaints and people get them wrong at the companies all the time. It's really tricky. So you want to do things in writing. You have to have an interactive dialogue sometimes. So I would just say, tentatively, we've counted your time as sick. Since you said you were sick, it was 2 days. You got your sick pay applied. That's it. Or you just show it up you put it in your notes. So hopefully someone told you in the office, because that's always our problem. Our production team's outside. Don't tell the office the person's out sometimes for a couple of days. But yeah, you can go ahead and apply that.
So I'm not sure if we can actually address this one, but we'll see. Throw it out here. How does a seasonal employee review and sign an electronic time card generated by his supervisor? I would imagine it's during the season in which they're working. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a time card.
So how does the seasonal worker sign? They can
sign an electronic time card generated by the supervisor.
Yeah, dated by their. Well, we like the employees to sign. It doesn't matter what category they are: seasonal, temporary, part-time, whatever they are, full-time, piece rate. They all should be signing. We prefer they all sign their own individual time cards, because that gives more corroborating proof when we have to go into the Department of Labor to prove that these time cards are valid. This employee signed it. And we like to put a little language on this time cards that say, like, I'm, confirming under penalty of perjury, these are the hours I worked. There are no more other hours I worked. I understand I can call payroll at, at whatever gmail.com, whatever the company name is, to let them know if there's a problem. And I also have not had any injuries that occurred this past week. So that way you cover your workers' comp and that at the same time. So that's always a nice phrase if you can fit it on. It's hard today. People don't even open their paychecks. But if they can fit it on there as a pop-up, it's nice to have a check for that. We use that to defend sometimes too. But it's hard. There's a lot of memory and things get more complicated. In the old days, everything was paper. We could like force all these things. But now it's harder with memory and things at some of these electronic programs. So we do the best we can. All of us do.
Sure is. All right. So how about if you rehire someone who has a new work visa from another country since the last time they had worked for you? Do you have to e-verify them again?
You know, I have the rehire and re-verification rules in there, but generally most companies, if there's a gap, they just just treat it like a brand new I-9. And that, especially if there's a change in cards and stuff, right? If they say that, but if they're like within 30 days or something that, if it hasn't expired, then you don't need to redo it. But a lot of people just make it a practice if there's been a big gap or a long enough gap that they just redo a new I-9 and they don't, I would say with one caution, look at the old I-9 if it's still there until it's destroyed, that there's no major differences like the name, the social security, because that might be used for criminal to say you should have known or questioned it. So.
All right. This is a good one. If an employee was hired full-time and on the day of his last probation period, they assigned him to on-call part-time and took away his mandated 5 sick days and his accrued vacation, is that acceptable?
Okay, so he was on probation. He was on orientation. Okay, couple things there that highlight. The first one is we try not to call things probation because that seems to indicate you're guaranteed a job and they might claim they were supposed to get 90 days free or whatever if they get let go. So we try to call it orientation time period. And you can let them go at the beginning of it, the middle of it, and there's no guarantee of 90 days. It's just you're still an at-will employee. It's an orientation period. There's no promise of employment before or after, but it's kind of a time you're training and watching and those kind of things. So then at the end of the orientation period, hopefully there's been some feedback along the way. If the position is to move to a different kind of position for whatever reason, business reasons, operation reasons, skill set reasons, then you can always do that as an at-will employee. You can say to someone, look, you're not working out in, customer relations level A, but we're going to move you over to, and because of business operations, we're kind of overstaffed anyway, but we're going to move you over to part-time on-call. We think you can succeed at that. We're going to train you that and start you now. Regarding the sick time, you had a lot packed in there, whoever asked that question. So regarding the 5 days of sick time they had when you transferred them, that's going to depend on the state you're in. It's going to depend on the policy that you have. So that one's a little bit more specific. We deal with 50 states, so everything is different. In California, you wouldn't be able to take that away. In Arizona, you may be able to. It depends on the state and some of those things. And then again, what your policies say. Do you have a use it or lose it policy? Do you have a rollover policy? How do they get their hours? Is it from just being there and employed, or is it from hours worked? So you get a certain percentage, like PTO for so many hours worked. So some of those things, sorry to give you, there's like some other factors there for whoever's asking to think about. Thanks.
Great. All right. There are still questions coming in here, but we are approaching 20 or so after the hour. I think we can maybe take one more question and then we're going to have to pretty much call it a day here. So I'm looking through here and we're going to go with this one here. It says we have timesheets as total hours for the day, but the employees sign a letter verifying the time for the week and the gross amount received for the pay period. Is that enough?
Yeah, that's good that you're doing those steps. Awesome to you. Make sure the time each day is start and end time, not just 8 hours a day and total hours for the week. So you want to have that there. I get suspicious when I'm auditing, and I know Heidi does the same. If we look at time cards that everything is 40 hours every week, 8 to 5 every day, we know that's not life. We know it's not reality, and DOL will just throw them out. People have emergencies. People have to go pick up their kids. People are sick and have time. So we'd rather them, the key to teach employees is they need to be accurate, because that's how you get the benefit of them. So just, you're doing the steps with having them have the employees sign them individually. But sometimes I like to have the supervisors have to really watch and pay attention. Are they really working those hours? Don't cover for them. A lot of times they do, like in construction, you'll have foremen who are trying to help out somebody on their crew and they know they leave 4 hours early and they just keep them on and they're not. They'll show on the time card that they worked, but they didn't. But we really need people to be accurate. That's really the key. So that's a good step. Just kind of audit it still. Don't just, let it go and think that's okay enough. I would audit it still. You'll be surprised what you find out there.
Fantastic. There is one more question, and we're 1 minute shy of 20 after. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. When a license, passport, or other document expires on the original I-9, we have to get an updated identity form and re-verify the I-9?
Oh, thank you for clarifying that. We don't want people to have to do more work than they need. So when it's a U.S. passport that expires, you do not need to do anything about it. That's permanent. Once you do the I-9, when someone starts, you don't go back to it again. If it's a permanent resident card, you don't go back to it again if it expires. If you have, what's the other one? A driver's license, you don't go back to it again. I mean, you may have safety OSHA driver's reasons you go back and check on a driver's license, but it's nothing to do with the I-9. If it's an employment authorization card for a visa, some type of visa that does have an expiration date, that's when you would have to keep a tickler system. And then when it expires or it's going to expire, we like to send, letters to the employee for 3 to 4 months prior to expiring to try to help them understand they can't work one day past the date it expires. So that's like, I call them 90, 60, 30-day letters. Those are the ones we're talking about. So it's a limited amount, if that helps. So thanks for clarifying so we don't make people do extra work.
Absolutely. All right, Julie, thank you so much to all of you still online. Thank you so much for attending, all of you guys getting this recording. We truly appreciate your participation, and we hope you guys enjoyed all the content, and we will look forward to seeing you guys all next time. Again, the recording and the PowerPoint will be coming out here in an email within the next day or so, so please keep an eye out on the email that you use to register for the event. And Julie, again, thanks so much for all of the time and preparation and for sticking around to answer all these questions. And we'll look forward to doing this again with you soon.
Yeah, thank you as always, Brian. Thanks for educating everybody. Bye.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.